So I came to college really wanting to be a 5K runner, and we needed points in the steeplechase for our conference meet. So my freshman year I tried the steeplechase, and for the next 4 years I really specialized in that event. And the steeplechase was so good to me because it was an event that it gave me a lot of opportunity early in my career. I made my first world team in 2007 and my first Olympic team in 2008, both in the steeplechase. And those years, I don't think I wouldn't have qualified in the 15 or the 5K. So the steeplechase just opened up the world of elite racing to me probably several years before I ever would have had access to it through another event.
So as a younger athlete, you weren't doing the steeplechase. What was it that brought you to the steeplechase, say college?
Yeah. So I didn't compete in the steeplechase in high school. In the US, I think there's only a few states that allow high schoolers to run the steeplechase. And so in Florida, it wasn't a high school event. I came to college, I'd never seen a steeplechase, I'd never run a steeplechase, but my freshman year, we had a really great 10K runner, a great 5K runner, and so my coaches thought I should give the steeplechase a go just to see if we could score points in the conference meet. My first steeplechase ever, I ran pretty well. I don't remember the exact time, but I think I ran around 10:20, maybe a little faster than 10:20. And that was really good for, even just, not just for my first one, but just running it in general on kind of the collegiate NCAA scene. That was a pretty solid time. So we decided to use that event to kind of progress through the rest of the season my freshman year. And then I surprised myself and my coaches and won NCAAs my freshman year in the steeplechase. So that kind of solidified the steeplechase as my event for the next few years.
Is it something you'd ever considered before you went to college?
I think even when I was in college, I would have never considered the steeplechase. It was definitely my coach's idea. The steeplechase takes a level of athleticism that I didn't know I had. I didn't play other sports growing up, and so coordination was not something that was really honed in me early in my younger years. And so, my coaches having the idea of me doing the steeplechase was definitely their idea. And we practiced it a couple of times, and I took to it a lot quicker than I would have thought, and then obviously went on to have a really good career in it.
So then we get to the PreClassic in 2009. You're doing the 1500, and you're one of the only American women to break the 4-minute barrier. Kind of talk us through the build-up to that event and kind of what clicked for you then?
So throughout my collegiate years, I focused on the steeplechase. It was my focus at conference, at nationals, going on to the US championships, and then at worlds for 4 years. And so I had really highly specialized in that event. Going into my senior year, we really wanted to put this final really solid stamp on my NCAA career. So indoors, I had a really great run over the course of indoors and set the collegiate record in the indoor 5K, the indoor mile, and the 3K. And so headed to the outdoor season, we kind of wanted to extend that, set of record runs. And as we were approaching NCAAs, kind of that timeline was running short. And I hadn't yet run the collegiate record in the 1500 meters. In fact, I think I had only run the 15 5 or 6 times in my whole college career. But the record was set by Hannah England, I think a year or two before at 4:06. And so running out of weekends to race college races, my coach reached out to the Prefontaine Classic and said, Jenny's just trying to break 4:06. Is there any way you would let a collegiate into your professional field? And I feel really grateful and really lucky that Tom Jordan, the meet director, was willing to let this totally scrawny little college kid into the professional race. And so in 2009, I towed the starting line against all the best Americans, all the best 1500 meter runners in the world, just thinking I just want to get to the back and hang on for dear life and hopefully break 4:06. But I'll never forget, I remember getting into the race, and again, I had only run the 1500 4 or 5 times in my whole college career up to that point. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. But I knew how to be competitive because I was always really competitive and always near the front in the steeplechase against, whatever competition I was facing. And so I remember getting into the race and going around the first lap or two and just thinking, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I thought these women were going to just totally, completely run away from me. And so I kept moving up and just incrementally, little by little, kept moving up. And then we come into the final lap and I'm like in the top 3 in this really great field of runners. And I thought, man, I have to run really hard because any minute now, like the whole field is going to fly by me, And yeah, I gunned for the win down the last 100 meters, didn't quite catch Burka, who ended up first that day, but looked up at the scoreboard and shocked myself, my coaches, and I think the whole track and field world. I was, I think, the 4th American woman to ever go under 4 minutes.
So what was your mindset like going into that competition, running against professionals and being a collegiate athlete at that point?
I think my race at the Prefontaine Classic, and especially as a defining moment in my career, is a perfect example that for a young, talented athlete, sometimes ignorance is bliss. I was running in this event that I wasn't very familiar with. I got to the starting line thinking, I have nothing to lose. I just want to run a fast time. I want to run as fast as possible. And I look back and I'm surprised by myself that I wasn't more intimidated by the competition. But yeah, I didn't know any better than to just go run as hard as I could. And by the time we got to a lap to go, I felt pretty good. And it all just came together so well.
Do you think if you're doing that race again now with the knowledge you built up in the last 9 years now, you would have done any differently?
I think it was such an advantage to not know what I was doing because I think I had that talent in me, but when you know how formidable some times and some records can be, I think there's kind of a mental weight to that. And to prove that point, it was 5 years until I broke 4 minutes again. So that stretch of time, I think, just goes to prove how hard it is to do, especially when you're really mentally aiming for that.
So after pre, you were still at the World Championships that year doing the steeplechase.
Yeah.
What was it like going back up to the steeplechase after that race? Were you kind of itching to get back down to the 15, or at that point you were still a steeplechaser?
One of the reasons that I think that 1,500 meters at the PreClassic was such a defining moment is because I think I left that track a different racer than when I entered, because it really did change how I viewed my prowess on the world stage. So I went on to run a 5K at Stockholm later on that summer and won the Golden League. It was a Golden League at the time. Won my first, big time international competition at the 5K. So again, like outside the steeplechase. I went back to the World Championships in the steeplechase and ran a huge PR. I ran 9:12, which at the time, lobbed off a lot of time. And so again, I think just being at pre and realizing that if I stick my nose in it, I can be competitive with anyone, I started to believe that in all the other distances. And instead of thinking, okay, this is kind of like my physical limit time-wise, I just started racing near the front and started winning big stuff.
So when did the decision come to then kind of focus on the 1,500, which is what most people know you for these days?
Yeah, so after the PreClassic in 2009, I didn't immediately switch over to the 1,500 meters. I still had the World Championships in the steeplechase that summer, and then I spent a whole another year, kind of continuing with the steeplechase. So that was 2009, and then in 2010, unfortunately, I suffered an injury, and so spending that year kind of away from the steeplechase, trying to avoid all the high impact and the difficulty of training for going over the barriers and over the water jump. In 2011 was the first year that I really considered, if we're taking a little bit of a break from the steeplechase, why don't I try a different event? And so 2011 was the first year that for the World Championships, I broke away from the steeplechase and ran a different event. I went to the USA's and was so grateful just to make the team in the 1,500 because it was so competitive, but then went on to win the World Championships. And that definitely changed the trajectory of my whole career from that point forward. So I'm grateful that I had the explosion on the scene in 1500 meters at the PreClassic, because I think if I hadn't had that, I might have considered the 5K for Worlds in 2011, or I might have like really forced myself to hurry back to the steeplechase. So having that sub 4 on my resume made the 1500s like seem like a possibility. So I'm just so grateful that I got a glimpse of what I was capable of, in 2009. So I would make that decision eventually in 2011. And then towing the line at 2011, I really wanted to make the final. I was just focused on making the final. I'd never done a race that I had 2 rounds before a final before. So it just seemed like a lot, it seemed like a lot of racing to me to have a first round, second round, and be racing for 5 days. So I just really, really focused on making the final. And then the beautiful thing, especially at that time, about being a sub 4 miler is that, or 1500 meter runner, is that if you have ever done that, you were in really rare company on the world scene at the time. There weren't many people racing that had gone sub 4. And so I just kept telling myself, like, that runner is in me, and when I need it, I think she'll show up. And sure enough, that happened.